I recently heard something that really stayed with me. Someone once defined hell as this. Hell is a comparison on the last day of your life when you come face to face with the person that you have become and the person you could have become. I don't know about you, but that one made me take a second thought. It really made me think, what is actually standing between who I am today and who I could become? And I want you to think about that for just a second. Not the polished version of you, not the version of you that you think you're supposed to be, but the real you. If nothing held you back, who would you become? That's an interesting question to think about for me also. And then the harder question, what is actually in the way of you becoming her? Because I don't think it's a lack of ability. I don't think it's a lack of opportunity for either one of us. I think for most of us, it's that we were taught it's this. We were never taught how to lead ourselves well. And when I say that, I don't just mean planners and schedules. I don't mean productivity hacks. I'm talking about something deeper. I'm talking about we were not taught how to lead ourselves emotionally. Because if you think about it, there are two things that determine how you show up in your life. What you do with the good in your life and what you do with the hard in your life, right? And most of us, we were never taught how to do either one of those well. And it starts way earlier than we think. It starts when we are kids. We don't just learn from one place either. We learn from everything and everybody around us. From what people say, from what people don't say, from how people look at us when they look away. We learn from other kids being mean. We learn from being told to quieten down. We learn from feeling like we're too much or not enough. And let me ask you something. Have you ever held back something you wanted to say because you were afraid of how it would be received? Yeah, me too. And at the same time, many of us were raised with messages like, be humble, be obedient, be good. And those aren't bad things, right? Of course they're not. Those are good things. But somewhere along the way, they got translated into something else. The translation can become, for some of us, don't stand out, don't take credit, don't put yourself first. And then emotionally, we were taught, there, stop crying. Oh, you're fine. Or maybe one of my favorite, right? Not. I'll give you something to cry about. Yeah, so what did we learn from all of those? What did we learn? We learned to disconnect. We learned to push things down. At a very young age, we learned to buffer. We learned that what we feel is something to manage instead of understand. And those patterns don't just go away. They follow us into adulthood. Maybe you want to speak up, but instead you stay quiet. You know you're capable of more. But then there's this little voice that says, who do you think you are? People like you don't do that. Some of those sound familiar, right? They do to me. And then there's this part, the receiving of the good, right? You look at your life, you do see where you used to be, and you see where you are now. You can actually see there's been a huge transformation. And if you're like me, sometimes you might even wonder at the amazement of how far you've come, because you just didn't think you'd make it. Not to here, but you did. And so, there's so much truth there. And you remember how hard it was. You remember the effort, the discipline, every time you fell down. And yes, sometimes you stayed down there for a while, but you got back up. You got back up every single time. All those baby steps forward that were required of you to get where you are today, those small shimmers of pride and all those steps forward, many of them you had to take more than one time because there was some steps back mixed in there. You can acknowledge all that, and you still struggle to give yourself the credit. You still struggle to say, I did that. That is where the challenge of receiving the good comes in. And that is where we have to have a shift. Because yes, God was there. Yes, He helped you. Yes, He strengthened you. And maybe you couldn't have done it without Him. And maybe you couldn't have done it without someone else in your life that was there to help you. But you know what? You showed up too. You couldn't have done it without you. Don't forget that. Don't lose sight of that. You are the common denominator here. You showed up. You made the decisions. You took all those baby steps, even when you were scared, even when you didn't know if it was going to work out in the end. You got back up when you got knocked down and you kept going. Those things matter. They matter so much. But for so many of us, receiving that accomplishment as our own just feels uncomfortable. It feels completely foreign, and we just deflect it. We minimize it. We brush it off. You say, oh, it was nothing. I just got lucky. It was all God. I couldn't have done it without my friend. I couldn't have done it without my mother. I couldn't have done it without my brother, right? But what we're really doing is disconnecting from truth. We are discounting our active participation of leading ourselves well in our own life. And I want you to listen to these next few sentences. If you don't hear anything else I say, I want you to hear these. It is okay for you to do the hard work. It is okay for you to be proud of the hard work that you have invested in becoming the person that you are today. And you are worthy of receiving that accolade. It couldn't have been accomplished without you. It couldn't have been accomplished without you. Now, let me ask you this. When was the last time you fully allowed yourself to acknowledge something you did well? Not halfway. Not with a disclaimer. Just you owning the great thing, the positive thing, the hard work that you did. When was the last time you fully allowed yourself to acknowledge that you did that well? And that's not a rhetorical question that I'm just throwing out there for you to skim over. I want you to think about it, and I want you to answer it for yourself. Journal about it if it helps. Sometimes journaling helps you process through the emotion of allowing yourself to be proud of your accomplishments. Journal about it if that's what you need to do. For me, this went deeper than behavior. It went back to what I believed. I was one of those people growing up. My interpretation of some of those basic fundamental principles became distorted. They became distorted in a way that today I truly don't believe God intended for me to interpret them the way that I did. Those things of being humble, obedient, and good. God sure didn't intend for me to interpret them as, don't ever take credit for anything that you do. Don't ever put yourself first. Don't take care of yourself as a priority. I internalized those things so wrong. I internalized them as, I'm not deserving. I shouldn't claim that I was responsible for outcomes or things that went well. Now, again, that was my interpretation, and after years, realized, oh, how wrong I was on that. But it shaped for how I lived my life for so long. But it shaped how I lived my life for so long. How I interacted with people. How I thought about myself for a long time. But over time, I realized something. That wasn't the truth. Because yes, on my own, I fall short. But because of Him, everything changes. Because God delights in me. He loves me more than I can even comprehend. His thoughts about me outnumber the grains of sand. One of my most favorite Bible chapters is Psalm 139. That chapter talks about how many wonderful thoughts the Lord has about us. So many wonderful thoughts that they outnumber the grains of sand. And oh my goodness, that can warm your heart in a moment of need. Think about that for a sec. Because God delights in me. He loves me more than I can even comprehend. His thoughts about me outnumber the grains of sand. That's Psalm 139. If you haven't read that chapter, it's one of my most favorite chapters. Read it. It talks so much about how the Lord just delights in us. How God has all these wonderful thoughts about us. So many that they outnumber the grains of sand. His love just pours through that chapter. So it's a good read if you want to read it. And just think about that for a second. The God of the universe has that many good thoughts about you. So it's not that you're undeserving. It's not that I'm undeserving. It's that you and I are loved beyond measure. And because of that love, we are freely given the good in our lives. And we can receive it. And if that's true, then there's a responsibility that comes with that. That responsibility is to steward your life well, to take care of yourself, to lead yourself well. Because how can you do what you're called to do if you're not taking care of the life that you have been given and the life that you have earned? Leading yourself is not selfish. I'm going to say that again. Leading yourself well is not selfish. It's stewardship. And the other side of this is sitting with the hard things in life. And the other side of this is sitting with the hard. It is just as important and has to be explored as well. But the other side of this is sitting with the hard. And it's just as important. And so we have to explore it as well. Because we weren't taught how to sit with hard things either. we were taught to avoid them, to fix them, to numb them, or buffer so we don't have to feel them. Something as small as consoling someone and telling them, dry up those tears, or let's get some ice cream to feel better. Don't think about that hard or messy thing that happened today. So we begin to sow the seeds of learning to avoid the hard instead of allowing ourselves to feel the emotions and process them. I remember this so clearly after Mark passed away. The heartache of losing him, it was like not anything that I had ever felt before. I could physically feel it, like right here in the middle of my chest, just this ache. It was there for so long. And I remember this particular day, I said out loud, I just don't want to feel it anymore. I just wanted the pain to stop. Yeah. And maybe you haven't experienced that exact loss, but you have something. And maybe you haven't experienced that exact loss, but you had something. You had a moment where you just thought, I don't want to feel this anymore. It's been too much for too long. And in a way, it's understandable, right? I mean, I think so. But also, self-leadership requires us to do something different. Self-leadership needs us to sit in the hard, capital H-A-R-D, and feel it. It asks us to process those feelings that really do seem unbearable at times. Because it is the only way to show ourselves that we can handle the thing that we're sitting in the middle of. We may not do it well all the time, and that's okay, but we can get through it. It's the simple fact that we are there. That is what matters. We take it in, we feel it because it is also worthy of our owning the circumstance and allowing it to shape us and mold us into a better version of us than we were before we faced such horrific events. We allow the hard to equip us with tools and the emotional capacity we need to face the next thing that comes our way, both stronger and with more gratitude, whether they be beautiful or terrible. You don't lead yourself well by avoiding the hard. You lead yourself well by learning to sit in it without destroying yourself. So let me ask you this. If your 80-year-old self could talk to you today, so let me ask you this. If your 80-year-old self could talk to you today, what would she say to you? What would she tell you to do? If that quote that I read at the beginning is true, that the greatest regret would be seeing who you could have become, and we got to look at the gap between who you are today and who you could become. I will tell you firsthand, I have seen lots of people that I would describe as successful, that had it all. The gap is not filled with talent or opportunity. It's filled with self-leadership. And self-leadership looks like learning to receive the good, which means understanding your worth, being honest about it. The good in your life didn't just happen to you. You showed up for it. And when you allow yourself to fully own that, it creates a whole different level of confidence in how you see yourself. It also looks like learning to sit with the hard, which means that sometimes life is terrible and we don't like anything about it. And then there are some things that we can't change at all, no matter how much we would want to make them not true. So we have no choice but to face those in those moments. When we decide to feel them, to process them, and to walk through the circumstances the best way that we know how, that is sitting with the hard. And that is how you become her. That is self-leadership.